Team Terrence Crawford says ERROL Spence is manufactured and he expires this Saturday. Fight World, it's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, Fight Hub, they have an interview with Bernie, who's the right-hand man, and he's from Omaha, represents Team Crawford. Crazy interview. I've only got like midway through it. It's a lot because I think Bernie's breakdowns are all over the place, but I want to kind of break down some of the things that he was saying. You guys can watch the interview yourself and interpret it, but the overall gist of what he's saying, if I'm paraphrasing, is that Terrence Crawford had it the hard way and ERROL Spence is a machine, and he's had the vehicle and all this help and the PBC and Fox and Showtime, and they put him together more than he's like a good fighter that earned it out the mud. So many ways I can dissect this. Let me start with this. If that is true, if you truly feel that ERROL Spence is kind of a hype job and he just had the right engine and the right machine and people behind him, that would be like saying 50 Cent is a machine and he was manufactured because he had Eminem and Dre behind him. But what about the fact that 50 dropped the classic album? What about that? You know, I've been patiently waiting for a track to explode. Oh, you can stun if you want and your ass will get rolled. Like, Eminem and Dre weren't on every single song. Some of them songs on Get Rich or Die Trying were made, hey, something special. Some of those songs were made before he even met Dr. Dre or Eminem or signed to Interscope and Aftermath, right? So you can't just say that's the only reason he blew. Some of the connections, like G-Unit appearances, made 50 Cent his whole run dope, like their mixtapes. He had already been cool with Tony Yayo and Lloyd Banks. Ass it out the baggy, this is more than dope, flawless flow. Huck it off a sign every horoscope to warm a road. I got a new toy that'll burn a hater and put a red dot in his eye like the Terminator. So you can't say 50 Cent was manufactured because he had a good engine helping the brand like Eminem and Dr. Dre pushing him. 50 is still the voice. He still wrote the music. He still hopped on the beats. He still wrote his own stuff. He still had some of them songs already done before he even met them. He already had a presence from his deal with Columbia, and people like kind of knew who he was from his street stuff. That street stuff, Dr. Dre didn't put crack in his hand and, you know, get him shot 9 times. Eminem didn't do that. So his whole story is what people bought into. So to say ERROL Spence, the guy with 3 belts, is manufactured is insane. And it's really hard to justify. So he's a machine and manufactured, but he beat 3 champions. Crawford's team, even Bernie in this interview, what he's saying is a bunch of old accomplishments. He said Ring Magazine at 135, Undisputed at 140. We've been at welterweight for 5 years. Notice when he gave the accomplishments of Crawford at 35 and 40, he elaborated on like, oh, Ring Magazine, Undisputed. But if you listen to this interview, he says at 147, we've been here for 5 years. Yeah, you have been here for 5 years. And that's when people turned on Terrence Crawford because the level of competition, he wasn't fighting the people. So it's like the pot calling the kettle black for Team Crawford to Bomac and Bernie and all the Crawford fans and Bud Buddies and whatnot to say ERROL Spence is the manufactured guy, the guy that fought 3 styles and 3 champions, not including Mikey Garcia's and Lamont Peterson and his mandatory Ocampo, who was bigger than him, not including those fights, not including anything other than the Ugas, Sean Porter, and Kell Brook fight, right? It's kind of hard to make that argument. Nothing you can say really makes that argument. Now, I am not Terrence Crawford's PR person, but if it was up to me, I would tell them to stop doing interviews, right? Because this is not going to play out good the more you talk. You would be better off just saying we're going to whoop ERROL Spence and the expiration date is this Saturday and that type of stuff, because that's just regular standard fight talk. But then when you're going out of your way, it just sounds like jealousy because you're trying to tear him down. He's saying our disdain is because they kept their guys away. PBC owes nothing to you. You weren't a PBC fighter. Why did Terrence Crawford resign? Crawford's team continues to lack accountability. Why did he re-sign to Top Rank if they were playing keep away instead of in the fight with Jose Benavidez, where he re-signed right before that fight? Why didn't he explore free agency and say, you know what, they don't want to make the fights cross promotionally. Let me check out my options and go over there and fight Keith Thurman and Ugas and Danny Garcia and Spence and whoever else was there at that time. But he didn't do it. And you got to really go where the action is at. So to me, this interview, just like many of the other ones, it looks bad because it looks like they're just hating on Errol Spence. There was actually a funny part in this, if you guys listen to the interview, where he's trying to build up Crawford's resume, which other people have doubts. He claims the media is hating on him and it's just a bunch of nobodies and YouTubers that don't know what they're talking about. But he's not proving this resume to be a great resume, but he tries to. And the funny thing is, Bernie said, oh, Terrence Crawford, he took guys' O's. He took their undefeated record. I kid you not. After he bragged about Terrence Crawford taking fighters' O's and taking undefeated fighters and blemishing their record for the first time, the question from the boxing reporter was something to the effect of, Crawford's going in there with an undefeated Errol Spence. And in an effort to not give Errol Spence any credit, the first thing Bernie said was, it don't matter that he's undefeated. Who cares that he's undefeated? You know, it don't matter if you have losses, you can still be a good fighter. Undefeated don't mean nothing. He said it don't matter that Errol Spence is undefeated, just because you lose don't mean nothing. Styles make fights. So again, you just bragged about Crawford taking people's O's when they were undefeated. Then you get an Errol Spence question and they bring up the fact that he too is undefeated. And then now you flip it to not give credit by saying, who cares that Errol Spence is undefeated? Styles make fight. You know, you can have losses and be a good fighter. So you can also be undefeated and have no body of work, and you're just undefeated because you haven't fought no one as good as Crawford, which is what happened. Some of these guys, they could have been undefeated, but they weren't these world beaters and proven guys that stood the test of time. And like Ndongo, like he wasn't this world beater that everybody knew and everybody had been watching for years, like a Manny Pacquiao, or, you know, how Inoue has a run and he's undefeated, right? It wasn't anything like this. It was just some guy who just happened to be undefeated that no one knew. And he fought a ranked guy, knocked him out that no one knew, Troy Yanofsky, and so on and so forth. So I dare you guys to just listen to this interview and study the logic and tell me what I'm saying makes less sense than what Team Crawford's Bernie is saying. He also made a point to say, oh, these guys are popular because some people have nothing to do and they were on Fox, which is like regular TV, and some of these fights are regular TV, so they basically had exposure. What are you talking about? ESPN is not pay-per-view. ESPN and Top Rank don't even really do many pay-per-views in general. Only a handful of Crawford's fights have ever been pay-per-view, and they've all flopped, the ones that were pay-per-view, right? So how did Errol Spence get built by PBC, and most of his fights recently have been on pay-per-view? So your whole they're getting exposure on regular TV argument is pretty null and void, because Terrence Crawford was on ESPN, which has most American homes have an ESPN in a basic cable package scenario, and he doesn't have the same branding and exposure. So instead of just admitting you guys re-signed to Top Rank, they had no one for you, maybe that didn't make the most decision, they're pointing the finger and blaming everybody else for why Crawford didn't get the looks, and people are complaining about the resume, and basically trying to tear down Errol Spence because the media is tearing down their resume or Crawford's resume. Crazy. Watch the interview. Let me know what you guys think, and I'm out.